Welcome to Wild and Wise, where I dive into conversations with trailblazers in business, design, and creativity. Together, we'll uncover the wisdom and wild spirit behind their journeys, the stories, the struggles, and the sparks of inspiration that shape a curated life. Follow along on Instagram at WildXWisePod. Now let's dive into today's episode. Good afternoon. This is Alex Ott with Wild and Wise, and I am so grateful to be chatting with somebody that I have admired from afar for a long time. Found her on Instagram when my feed was full of everything I needed to find myself again and to be reminded of my own power. So I'd like to introduce everyone to my guest today, Sophie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are, and then we can dive into your background, what you teach, and things like that.
So I support specifically women who abandon themselves in love. Primarily, I work with women who've been in a long-term relationship or a marriage, something 10 plus years. They got out of the relationship and then they found themselves in another relationship and they realized they have certain patterns that they're repeating and it ended up in heartbreak. So I help them identify those patterns and break those patterns so they don't attract the same type of pain or misaligned love ever again.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
How did you get into the business of doing this? Because I would assume that one would only be able to teach women this lesson if they had learned it themselves.
Yep. Yeah. So I was married for 18 years. I got married very young, around 23. I'm up 49 now. And unfortunately, it was a toxic marriage. My ex-husband was more narcissistic in nature than I'd like to admit. And I got out of that relationship and I got into another relationship with a man who I wouldn't necessarily say is narcissistic, but emotionally avoidant and emotionally immature for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I fell deeply in love. And unfortunately, that relationship came to an end. We had a child together. And I realized that it wasn't so much the breakup of that relationship that was so painful. It was the fact that I saw myself repeating patterns in that relationship. And even though I was communicating that I was repeating patterns and I wanted change and I was looking for alignment, I wasn't getting it. And because I wasn't getting it, I was abandoning myself to keep the connection, to keep the relationship, to save the relationship for the sake of my son. And unfortunately, it just came to a point where that relationship had to end. The pain is not losing the relationship. The pain, the most significant pain I've ever experienced is watching myself abandon myself a second time around in love. And that was the biggest heartbreak I'd ever really experienced. And so I wanted to support women to go through some kind of program or some kind of learning or some kind of mentorship so that they never had that happen to them again. Because I believe deep down inside, I wasn't the only one.
Right. Absolutely. But I do find that even though you're not the only one, your voice and perspective is so unique. One thing that really rocked my entire world was a piece that you had written where you said, why is it as powerful women that we show up in work with demanding what we're worth? We show up and we negotiate deals that benefit our business or brand. We don't take no for an answer. We fight for what's right. We do all these things and then we turn around and go home and we lose ourselves. We find ourselves in codependency. We find ourselves self-abandoning. And it really, and I had been post-breakup at the time, but it super, super shifted my viewpoint of even dating, where I thought I need to show up in a way that's reflective of the way I protect myself in business, because that was just something that really stood out to me. And so I'm just wondering more about what is it like? Talk to me more about why or how some women show up in the workplace as this force. And I know this is a lot of women. And yet at home, maybe their needs aren't being met. They've self-abandoned, etc. Let's talk more about that.
So it all happens in childhood before the age of 7. So you learn from a young age to earn love. So you either had a narcissistic parent, an emotionally immature parent, an absent parent, a wounded parent. And that comes from generational trauma. So if you think about, women, unfortunately, have only had the right to have a financial instrument for about 50 years now. So if you think prior to that, so like my mother's age and the grandmother's age, unfortunately, they've been oppressed for so long. They don't have the same rights and liberties that we have. They most often were parenting, not just the women, the men also, but the women were parenting from a more of a wounded, fractured place. And the men, unfortunately, have been conditioned their entire lives to not be vulnerable, to not show emotion, to not cry. And so they've been shut down generation from generation to generation also. So when you are young and you're looking to gain love and you're being outspoken or you're sharing your opinion or you're speaking your truth and you're told, children are to be seen, not heard, or you're too much, or you're overreacting, or you're too sensitive, you feel rejected, you feel shamed. You learn very quickly that to earn love, you got to take on an identity. The peacekeeper, the caretaker, the fixer, the overfunctioner, the perfectionist, the high achiever. And so that is a survival strategy that keeps you safe when you're young, but it keeps you stuck when you're an adult. And so many women, men too, but I only work with women. And I'm not here to dismiss men. It's not about that. The patterns work for them too, but I'm just going to speak in the context of women. Many women, they go out and they be the perfectionist, the overfunctioner, and the high achiever because of the validation. It's a way to be externally validated. They attach their worthiness to something outside of themselves. And so while they can perform results, they can control it. They don't have to necessarily be vulnerable. And so they can have a vision and they can act in alignment with the vision. And then they hire people who are in alignment to their vision. In love, it's very different. You can't really control your partner to just like shape up and align to your vision. And the moment you start to get rejected or dismissed or devalued at home, it triggers your trauma responses from childhood. So most oftentimes it happens in the micro moments. So a woman wants to hold a boundary at work. She gets an insubordinate employee. She writes him up or fires him, woman or man, whoever she's dealing with. She has power. She has consequences. It affects her money. She has no issues with that. This is not personal. This is not emotional. But at home, she goes to assert a boundary and all of a sudden she's face to face with rejection, which is one of the primary wounds, or abandonment, because she's either going to hear yes, and that's amazing, but most oftentimes she's going to hear a no. And then she either has to face the fact that he may walk out or she has to leave, right? Because if her boundaries aren't being upheld and there's no consequence, and the pattern repeats. And it's in that moment when she goes to assert herself and create a boundary that she is flooded with emotions. And those emotions are interpreted as danger. And that danger engages a trauma response. And so fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And most oftentimes women, they fawn, they people please, they backpedal. And so she sets a boundary. She's too scared to hear the answer of rejection or abandonment. She backpedals. She doesn't enforce a consequence. He knows that he's never going to be held accountable. He doesn't be responsible for his actions. The cycle repeats. That's just an example.
That is the example.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's an easy one for everybody to understand because boundaries is like, it's a thing.
Yeah, but man, I think I have, I'm 39, almost 40 next year. I have 2 kids. I never got married. I met my partner later in life. We have children together. He was older than me by 11 years. So he also kind of didn't think he would ever have kids. And so we're both kind of like these 2 rebels who were perfectly happy being independent, probably perfectly happy never being married, who fell deeply in love. And we separated this year, but I think so much of my own personal reflection and challenge, and I'm even challenged in dating, today while I've gone on a few dates, is that I thrive at work. I thrive in the control of hiring and firing and reinforcing and getting what I need and having the vision. And then I do all of the things you just described at home. I'm triggered. I backpedal. I abandon my needs. And I'm wondering, when you're working with women, what are some of the key factors in shifting out of that cycle? I know that's a big question because that's the work you do, but I'm just interested in where does that shift?
Yeah. So I feel the most important thing is awareness. So the awareness. So what happens when you do that in those micro moments? You send out a frequency to the universe, and that frequency transmits a language that says, if you pick me, choose me, love me, I will stay with me. I will shrink. I will dim. I will wobble on my boundaries. I will drop my standards, and I will prioritize you. So that energetic frequency that gets sent out to the universe is picked up by narcissistic, emotionally avoidant, or emotionally immature partners because they're very psychic. They feel it. They see it. They hear it. They smell it off of you. And so you're almost like targeted by that type of individual because they know you're not going to hold them responsible. They know you're not going to hold them accountable. They know that you're going to overfunction. They know that your overfunctioning is going to kill the polarity in the relationship. They know that you're not going to be vulnerable. So they can either be a little bit lazy because you're going to do all the work. And that's how your energetic frequency is actually a match for that type of individual. And so when women actually like can see it like that, it's a pretty sobering moment, because all of a sudden they're like, every time I backpedal on a boundary, I'm actually telling the universe, I'm a match, bring me more of somebody who's going to push my boundaries. Mm-hmm. You see, because you can only be a match for if you're going to backpedal on your boundaries, you're only going to bring people in who push your boundaries. But if you're firm on your boundaries and you're okay in those micro moments and you can hold yourself through the emotional storm, the uncomfortable emotion is really all it is.
Right.
And you can be more committed to the woman you're becoming and the future you want and the vision you have than you are to that moment, to the connection of somebody who's misaligned. You be more committed to your future, then you can pull yourself through it. Mm-hmm. And you tell the universe, I choose me, even in the hard moments. And the universe will then bring you a match for somebody who chooses themselves, even in the hard moments. So it really starts with awareness.
Yeah. How did you, I mean, I know you've gone through things, but like, what is the middle journey for you that you became such a teacher? Because I find like, it seems as though you've been practicing this your whole life. And so like, how did that evolve from the heartbreak to watching yourself choose again to then building out sort of like an education and knowledge that is shared? Because the consistency of your voice is really admirable just from a communications expert, but also, you know, what was the journey from, I don't want to ever feel this way again, to developing your business and brand to then getting it out there? I'm interested in the business piece of all of this and how you develop that.
Sure. So I've been a coach and a mentor since 2003. I appreciate the acknowledgement on my communication. Articulation happens to be my gift. I trained and developed the senior executives across North America in sales, leadership, coaching, and communication. So sales strategy, sales process, opening, closing deals, how to coach for performance. I've been doing that since 2003. Human performance happens to be a passion for me. And so I thought I was going to retire around the age of 39. I got a divorce around 41, 42-ish. And then I went through cancer and I got pregnant. We had the pandemic. And then I was like, my baby went to daycare. And I was like, okay, well, you know, what am I going to do? I was about 46 years old, a little young to retire. And my capital was heavily invested in real estate. And so I thought, you know, I want to do something. And I was like, universe, what put me to work? You know where my talent is. And I had this calling, you know, it was just this feeling that if there was one person I could serve, who would I serve? And I know the pain I went through I was married for 18 years. 6 months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I refused treatment to get pregnant. Then I had a baby in the pandemic. And I know the pain of that. There was nobody who could really support me. I had to put a team of people around. And I just thought there has to be other women. I can't be the only one who was married for 18 years to somebody who was narcissistic and toxic in nature, that needs somebody to show them the way or connect the dots or highlight what's in the blind spot or make things make sense. And therapy, which I did do, wasn't helpful because not a lot of therapists fully understand narcissism. It's only been diagnosed since the 70s. And if you haven't lived it, you don't really understand the nuances of it. And if you're not a high performing woman and understand what it is, especially in your 40s or 50s, to have like broken through some glass ceilings and paved the way for the women after us and followed in some pretty, you know, big footsteps. If you haven't actually lived that, I didn't find there was really anybody who could speak to me in a way that was nuanced. And so I just felt in my heart that I have what it takes in terms of my resilience and my business acumen to put something together. And I have what it takes in terms of my coaching skills. But more importantly, I lived it 25 years.
Right.
And there's no woman who's going to sit across from me that's going to run a pattern on me that I'm not going to be able to call out. And she knows it.
Yeah.
And she needs that because she's smart, because we're smart and we're used to running circles around people. And she actually doesn't want that. She wants somebody to be like, she wants to grow and she needs somebody who's strong to do it. So I stepped up.
It is very different than therapy because it's almost like you would go to therapy to get to the point where you're then ready to fully flip your own patterns on its head. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like therapy is to sort of sort out the past and understand the patterns, and then get to this place where you're now faced with them, and coming to somebody like you feels like, pending the situation is proper with the type of clientele that you serve, is the way to untangle, unlearn, and rebuild what a future could look like with a high performing woman that has had these types of triggers and traumas in the past.
Yeah. So, well, I think there's a lot of validity in what you said. I'm not sure if therapy even delivers on everything you just said.
Yeah, so true.
I think you said a lot, and I'm not sure that women. I don't think I got my patterns from therapy.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that you're touching on a lot of different subjects that I kind of just want your opinion on. But I think
Sure.
for those listening, and maybe who just don't know or haven't really heard the term narcissist, and that's, could be its own podcast in itself, of course, but like maybe at a high level, like what are some of your findings in what a narcissistic partner does or looks like?
Sure. Okay, so first of all, I'm of the mindset that there's a spectrum when it comes to narcissism.
Agreed.
There are some people who believe that it's genetic. I don't believe that. I believe that it comes from wounded parenting. I believe that narcissistic individuals are unfortunately stunted in their emotional development around the ages of 5 to 11 due to something that happened in their childhood that was traumatic or interpreted as traumatic. Maybe it wasn't necessarily something traumatic, but they thought it was.
Right.
And they carry a lot of shame, and they're just not able to feel, they're not able to face their shame. They're not able to sit in their uncomfortable emotions. And so they operate from ego, and they're very charismatic individuals. They often do very well in business. They often run a room easily. And some easy ways to identify narcissistic qualities. I won't necessarily say that this is like defines a narcissist, because anybody could have these qualities. But if you're in a relationship with somebody and they are constantly blame shifting, so putting the blame back on you. So for example, you want to visit something and they're like, oh yeah, but you did this, you did this, you did this. And they never internalize or look at their impact or hold themselves accountable or take a look at the actions and the effect it had on you. That's something. Gaslighting. So they're constantly distorting your perception of reality. And it could be as blatant as, I saw you drop $100 bill, and they're like, no, I didn't. That didn't happen. It's just blatant like that. And they're very defensive in nature. So nothing is their fault. They don't take accountability. They don't take responsibility. And they take pride in high performing women because they're validated by high performing women. So they have a low sense of self-worth, and they want somebody who is regarded as high value standing next to them. And so they pray after high performing women, specifically women who are loyal in nature, because they're able to flip the high performing woman's strengths on her to keep her in the relationship. And then they erode her confidence slowly by the gaslighting, the blame shifting, the defensiveness, the manipulation. And so she starts to not be able to trust her own eyes, ears, and senses. And that person eventually slowly takes influence or control over her, unfortunately.
Oof, all too relatable.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. I think, when these kind of new age, if we'll call them that, terms, whether it's
Sure.
gaslighting or narcissists come out, I think people either run from them or overuse them sometimes, but I think that what it's given us is this beautiful pathway to better understand each other and our relationships. And your description was absolutely stunning. You talked about sort of eroding of self-trust. And it sounds like a lot of the clients you work with and a lot of the content that you create is around the core themes of love and power and identity and how those things all play together. Self-trust is obviously a loaded phrase, but for someone who has repeatedly trusted themselves into pain or abandoned themselves, let's talk a little bit more about your clients beginning the process of rebuilding self-trust. What does that look like?
Yeah. So self-trust happens in the micro moments, and it's about small goals. You don't want to start too big. So for example, you say you want to drink a glass of water a day, drink a glass of water a day. Maybe every day is too big of a goal. Maybe it's 3 times a week, and then you hit that goal, and then you again, and then again, you start to expand out. And so self-trust is really about being able to hold yourself and back yourself fully in the moments that matter most, which are the micro moments. Speaking your truth, even if your voice shakes or if it disrupts the room. Honoring your intuition the first time. Seeing a red flag and walking away from it the first time. identifying potential in somebody and understanding that potential is not the same as reality, and you'll be living in a fantasy if you just go for potential. Prioritizing your own self-care, because the more you love yourself and care for yourself, the more devoted you are to yourself, the more of a match you are for somebody being devoted to you. So self-trust is really about honoring your own inner knowing. And we've just been taught, especially women in their 40s and 50s and up, we've been taught to override our inner knowing for so long. It's like the good girl conditioning, don't rock the boat, be a good girl, prioritize the needs of the family over yours. And that is honestly, it's making too many women sick.
Mm-hmm.
It's really making women sick, because every time you override your inner knowing, or you say yes when you mean no, it creates anxiety in the body. And anxiety is the precursor to inflammation, which is the precursor to all autoimmune. And so for me, it manifested like cancer. And so that's one of the other reasons I bring that into my work, is because 80% of people who are suffering from autoimmune diseases are women. And I'm not the only one who believes this, but I personally believe it's because we're not honoring our knowing.
Yes. I suffered from a pretty horrendous autoimmune that I haven't really shared on the podcast.
Oh.
I don't know exactly what it was. I'm now in the process of curing it through a very strict diet, and I found an amazing functional health doctor who's helped me through it. But I think this is like a really good time to talk more about the body's knowing. So fascinated by what you just described, and it made me feel a little bit emotional because it's so true. Like I can feel that feeling when you know, that
No, it's
feeling when
okay.
you know something is not right or isn't for you, and you hold it. And I absolutely believe that I knew when I was first getting sick, I knew I had such a knowing where it came
Yeah.
from. The stress of saying no, the stress of being rejected, the stress of conversations being put back on me, the stress of bringing my needs to somebody who just blamed, the stress of that person being emotionally immature or shutting down, the stress of narcissistic tendencies. I know that literally everything you say, I'll say it a million times till I'm blue in the face, but like that is my life and so many other women that are impacted by the work that you do. But it's very interesting how quickly everyone around me didn't want it to be that, even though I was voicing, like, I know what this is from. It's from that stress. And part of me, this is very personal, but part of me leaving was I started to see it was red eczema all over my face and my neck, my eyes, my mouth. I still have it on my hand right now. And I looked in the mirror and I thought, I look like somebody that's been beaten down. And I know that it's not physically beaten, but I could look in the mirror, and that's really what gave me some type of permission to call it, to be done with it, because I could look in the mirror and say it may not be that physical abuse, but there is something happening that my body is holding on the inside that is then bringing out this pain physically in my body to make me ill. And it scared me so much that it was a big push for me to make a big change. And it's taken almost a year to get even close to like feeling better again. And it's something I haven't talked a lot about, but everything that you just described, where the roles that we've played in society, the way we've seen that our mothers have only been sort of that first generation of women to be able to step up and say no, or to be financially independent enough to choose a life for themselves. And we were taught that, and we took that on. And I just want to talk more, because there's now, I think, a lot more people talking about women's being prone to autoimmune as a result of sort of this. And I do know friends that have had cancer that very much feel as though it was a suppression of energy, a suppression of their needs. So tell me more about what you found in those experiences, or that people that you've talked to.
Was there something specific you want to know?
I mean, what is the pattern that you're seeing that is happening to women, that they're spending years of abandoning or years of suppressing only to really find themselves ill? Is that something you're seeing often?
Yeah, everywhere. And I've been able to identify, call them PowerPoints, and so I kind of look at it like if you think of me like a DJ, and a DJ's job is to calibrate the bass and the highs, right? He's got all these little knobs. Part of my work is to help you identify exactly where you're bleeding out power. And so it's like most of the time when I talk to a woman, I say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high, how effective are you at honoring your intuition the first time? It's always below 5. And so if you think about that, how much power is she bleeding out by not honoring her intuition? Even if it was 5, and if she can turn that up, if we can recalibrate it, is what I call it, to a 10, she starts to plug that leak. So there's like her intuition, red flags, boundaries, standards, prioritizing herself. So there's all these power points, and she's just most often time over functioning in her work to compensate for how she's under functioning in relationships or in love. Or she's over functioning in love in the way where she's carrying more than what is her responsibility, more of the emotional labor, more of the physical labor, and that all has an impact on the heart, the body, the mind, the soul. And she knows it. She's just been conditioned her entire life to do it that way, until what happens is she's been in such a long-term relationship, and then she repeats it the second time. And like I said, that heartbreak is so devastating for her. She's done, because she doesn't want to do that again. And that's when they usually come to me, is because they're starting to, like, I'm saying things in a certain way where they come to me, they're like, I think you're talking to me. Mm-hmm. I never heard anybody describe it the way that you describe it. And I'm a little bit shocked. And I mean, it's validating, but in the end, I was just like, Instagram's new for me. Like, no one else is actually describing it like this. I'm like, well, I need to speak more, because I can nuance it for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't mean to smile in a way. It's just,
you should be proud. You should. You found a niche. You found this lane that is so 100% your own, that speaks to so many women. And I would agree with them. I'm on the internet. I'm on Instagram all the time, finding empowering quotes, business quotes, females, finding yourself again. And your voice has been the most detailed and like sharp and niche of a very particular experience that is so profound.
Yeah, thank you for that. So most of the women I've worked with have had some form of health issue. I've had them, pretty much all of them, like endometriosis, like all of it, hair falling out, loss of teeth, skin, weight gain, sleepless nights, anxiety, right up into lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia. I ended up with cancer. It's like that. And it's more than that too. We all, myself included, have a hard time being vulnerable. So it's about receiving the love and the intimacy that we actually want, which takes it right down to like polarity in the relationship and over functioning. And then it takes it right down to guilt and shame cycles. These are all the things that we're all experiencing.
Let's break down receiving the love that you want. What does that mean, and what does that look like?
Well, it's really hard to receive love when you're an overfunctioner and you don't want to be vulnerable. And the reason women don't want to be vulnerable, this particular profile of woman, is because she's bracing for heartbreak. Whether it's because it's the second or third or fourth relationship, whether it's because she keeps repeating the same pattern, attracting the same pain in a different skin bag, or it's because it's heartbreak from her childhood. And she doesn't want to experience disappointment or heartbreak. And because she's used to being so high performing, she kind of has this mindset, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done right. And that's a tricky one.
It is.
Because then she doesn't give space for the partner to step up. And if she's not patient enough for that person to do it on their time, in their way, she can really, if it was a man, she could really, like, she cuts his balls off almost, in a punitive way. There's like a pattern to that. And I'm only smiling because I know it for myself.
Yeah, same girl, same.
You want the trash taken out? You want the trash taken out now, not in an hour. And okay, fine, I'll just do it myself then. And like, it's there's a cost to that. And it creates resentment, and it creates anger, and it creates a block for intimacy. And the resentment and anger, it manifests in the body. Those are not good emotions. It creates a spiral in the brain, and it creates the inability to have polarity in the relationship where the man doesn't actually step up and lead. So she's constantly leading, and that fatigues her. It emotionally is exhausting. And at the end of the day, she's not really getting her full fulfillment because she's not open for it. And she knows it. Because
what do you mean
scared.
when you say polarity? What is polarity in the relationship? You've said that a few times. What does that mean?
It's like the magnetic pull. It's like the chemistry. So if a woman is over functioning, the man leans back. So she's leading. and she's in her masculine, which is great. A woman can be in her masculine energy. But if she wants the man to be the container, she wants the man to lead, she wants the man to pursue, she wants the man to chase, she wants the man to step up, she can't take over the entire space with her high performing effectiveness. Well, she has to lean back to receive and allow him, to step up.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like in general, and this is a very general question, it's that women step up when men are fill in the blank on some of the descriptors we've used of, emotionally immature, narcissistic. So women inherently step up because they're not there. Do you think that it's because the women have that high functioning mentality from being in sort of these trauma experiences that they feel like they have to control? Or is it a dance of both? Like, I'm not sitting here trying to blame one or the other, but do you
Yeah.
find it's that they found each other and they're both kind of dancing this dance? The narcissist wants the high achieving woman, the woman wants control and power and cuts off his balls, and then they're just doing this dance of blame. Like, is that sort of how you
Well, that's
see
the
it?
match. That's the energetic match. Until she corrects that pattern or heals that pattern, she's going to be a match for that type of partner. And he looks for that.
And when someone like that works with you, finds those patterns, heals those parts, holds that boundary, finds themselves, keeps those promises, what is the next phase of a match? What does that look like? What does a healthy match look like for a woman who's recovered from something like that?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So what becomes available for her is a man in his leadership. So a king is never going to give his kingdom to a woman who proclaims she's a queen if she can't hold boundaries, because she's going to drop the wall and let the enemy in. And he can't trust her. But when she can hold boundaries and he can trust that she's also going to protect the sanctity of the kingdom, then he will approach her. So what becomes available for her is reciprocity, mutuality, love rooted in honesty and transparency and all those things. And it becomes less about the heated passion and the chemistry, because that's often rooted in like a lower frequency of validation. It becomes less about that and more about meeting each other in the middle. That's what becomes available. Honesty, transparency, reciprocity, mutuality, maturity, open conversation, accountability, responsibility. Things she's probably not used to in relationships, but something she's yearning and craving for, because it's actually something she's very good at providing.
Yeah, that's really
She's
beautiful.
actually very good at it, and she's just used to pulling teeth.
Right. So interesting going through this sort of cycle of ending a relationship like you've described, working on yourself enough to stop those patterns only to find somebody like that. It's almost like I haven't found that yet, but I can only imagine the gratitude, even though I know it will be hard work for me to continue to unlearn, because you're now practicing everything you've tried to unlearn in real time with a real human who continues to be a mirror for you. And that's something I am scared of. Like I want to work with somebody to show up as my most authentic self, and as a self that is more fully realized, that is more self-loving, that is less self-abandoning, that has learned from these things that I've sort of brought into my life based on my past and things like that. And yet I find myself scared that like I don't want to fuck that up, or I don't want to. And I think I also believe, anybody that's meant for you will be for you, but it's really beautiful to hear that it's like something that you really kind of build together. But I love the king and queen story that you just said. It's like for him to really trust, for you to be invited in, you have to be holding your own boundaries and self-respect, self-love.
He's not going to validate her the way a Joker is. A narcissistic and immature man, an emotionally avoidant man. He's going to tell you anything you need to hear to validate you. See, that's one of the patterns that is required to heal, is the addiction to external validation, the attaching your worthiness to something outside of you. She has to be fully self-sourced. She has to be her own number one champion. She has to believe in herself, not just because of what she can do for others, but because of who she is for herself and the man or the partner and the world. And high value man, if you want to call it that, versus a low value man, if you want to use that language, he knows, because he knows it for himself. And, many women use, there's no good men out there, they're all the same. It's an unfortunate gross generalization, because it then is almost like that's the narcissism in her, because she's now blame shifting,
Mm-hmm.
denying responsibility, not holding herself accountable for how she's actually showing up, for her own patterns. And that is why she's a match for that. And it's
Amen.
hard for some women to hear.
It's so, so, so true. I find myself very much of the belief that there are wonderful men. I've never felt like there's no good men, but I know that type of frequency of friend or woman. And I do
Yeah.
find that I think it's also like every way and moment that you evolve and you learn something new or you shed a skin, there's like a whole new type of man that's out there for you. Like
Yes.
every step you take, every move you make as you come back to your most, I call it almost like primal self before you learn the masks, before you learned the armor. I mean, I'm an armor
Yes.
queen, before you learned all that, the way that you were silly, the way that you were weird, the way that you liked to be loved, the way you had maybe your first love, where it was maybe soft and wonderful and kind and romantic. And, I just think every time I kind of read something, see you, encounter someone, and I can tell something has left me in like a really beautiful way, I just think
Mm.
open the door to somebody different or a different path to a different way for a different person that I'm meant to find whenever that time may be.
Well, and it's really beautiful what you're saying, because now you're talking about stepping out of familiarity. See,
Mhm.
the reason this happens is because she's replicating the same dynamic from her childhood.
Mhm.
And she's searching for the love her parent never gave her in a narcissistic or emotionally avoidant partner. It's the same dynamic. And until she can see that it's the little girl in her that's actually making the choices, it's not she's not in control.
Yeah.
She's operating from a childhood blueprint. And that's the difference. She doesn't operate from that same blueprint at work. And so it's about, taking a little of her identity from work and bringing it into her love life and like growing this part up. It's actually, she just needs to mature this piece.
Mhm.
It's just her underdeveloped piece that got stunted because of the way it was with her family. And what
Yeah.
you're talking about is like stepping outside of your comfort zone. That's where the miracles are. That your mind, your ego mind, its job is to keep you safe. So it's going to gaslight and sabotage you to keep you inside the comfort zone, which is just going to keep you inside the pain.
Mhm.
And so it's really, it's a lot of mindset work, yes, to believe in what's possible. And it's also about being able to really fully back yourself in the moments and to identify the patterns and to commit to not being that woman anymore.
So for those listening, tell us about what it looks like to work with you, about what you offer. I want to know more about the work, not just the work you do, but what does it look like if somebody wants to sign up with you? What are packages that you provide? I want you to kind of have a platform to talk more about what it looks like to work with you one-on-one or in a group setting.
Thank you. Yes. So one-on-one work is it's available. I work with several women one-on-one. Not everybody wants to work in a group environment. They prefer to have the exclusivity and the confidentiality to really share things that they haven't been able to share with anyone. A lot of women come to me because they have some things they just want to talk about. That's 100% available. I also have 2 group programs. One's called the Sovereign Woman. The Sovereign Woman is my 1-year-long transformation. It's a mastermind, and it covers all my programs, all my masterminds, all my master classes, all my mini minds. It covers off all the calibration points. It covers off all my power and confidence work. It covers off all my magnetism work. And then the other program I have is called Convicted. That's the work, the deepest work I do around power, identity, and confidence. Actually, that program is starting on October the 23rd. And then every month I run a mini mind, and it varies in topics. One was on the courage to change. The other one was on flirt. How do you start to play with life again? Because I find high performing women, we get a little intense. We forgot about
Really?
that flirty side of us, and to be, get back into your aliveness, your joy, your magnetism. We got to play, feminine play is magnetic. And we get a little bit caught, being a businesswoman in today's world, not so much today, but maybe 15 years ago, it's like we had to show up like men.
Yep.
And
Today's world too. I feel I catch myself a lot like on a date where maybe the first time we met, I was so fun and flirty. And then we go to like a formal date and I'm just like choking with just like
yeah,
anxiety and it feels vulnerable. And then I just put on the man thing and he's like, you're so serious. It's everything you just described. Like I just had this happen where he's like, you're so serious. What's going on? I'm like, cause I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
yeah. I forgot how to just be me without it being in business. I know a date feels like a consultation.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Teaching high performing women how to like let loose and have fun. Because I also feel like sorry, I know you're talking about your programs.
No,
In
it's
one of the
okay.
said like, how to then find your worth and not self-abandon. But I almost find like sometimes I'll go too far and then I'm like, this is what I am. This is what I need, and then it's like, this two very like, where is this beautiful, soft place in the middle, because you've been like so pushed over or gaslit. And then you finally find your voice. And then that's when you're like the most intense because you're like, here's how it is, buddy. It's like horrible.
Well, this is a transition period. I mean, you're not going to have your elegance and grace come in until you really, learn emotional mastery. And that's part of it also.
So the mini masters, so you have options for like a long-term 1 year,
Yes.
one-on-one, I'm your person.
Yes.
Then you have group settings for the sovereign woman. And then it
Yes.
sounds like if people kind of want to dip their toes, you have like these mini masterminds as well.
Yes. Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, tell everyone where they can find you online.
The best place to find me is Instagram. So evolve with _Sophie, SOPHIE. That's the easiest, best place. You can DM me on Instagram or email me. I prefer if you DM me. My emails get a little bit overrun.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah,
well, is there anything else that you feel like you wanted to cover or share through this conversation? Just want to give one last little moment if there's something that you feel is important for the world to know.
The only other thing that I would like to just say, because it's come up in my practice quite a lot recently, is how a woman deals and rises in the face of betrayal. And many women in the face of betrayal, we're still collapsing in our mindset with our negative self-talk, taking too much responsibility, thinking it's our fault, collapsing with the emotional storm and allowing the emotions to take over, collapsing in our fears. And the betrayer then is not held accountable and they get let off the hook. And I feel like we need to do more work as women to hold people who are betraying us accountable with the appropriate consequences in a graceful and elegant way. We don't need to lash out. We don't need to talk ill. We just need to make our move. And I feel like it's really important that we start to address that more. And you'll see more of that start to come out in my content, because too many of us are collapsing rather than just making aligned moves.
I love the idea of a consequence just being an action that we take on our own to cut it off over to like retribute and come back at, because that puts more into us of negativity that we don't need. And it's hard, I have a very dear friend who continues to go back to a situation and she'll be like, hey, I'm not doing it. And we're so proud. And then she goes back. And of course I love her unconditionally, but man, I would love for her to know more about that. And I'm sure there's plenty of other women as well.
Yeah, just hold the boundary, hold the consequences, make your move, because it just repeats the cycle. And the over-functioner in you or the over-explainer in you is going to get hooked. And so we got to learn how to cut that. Yeah,
absolutely. I am so grateful for your time, for your insight, for your knowledge. It's just what you have to say, who you are as a person, what you've been through, and sharing your heart with the women that you work with is such a beautiful gift. And I'm so grateful to have you on Wild and Wise. As we wrap up, I always like to ask everyone, I think the definition of wild is such a spectrum of what makes you feel wild. Could have been in your 20s when you were wild. It could be a wild force, a wild creativity, and then wise. It means so many different things to so many different people. So my final question in closing is, Sophie, what makes you feel most wild and what makes you feel most wise in your life today?
Well, the dance floor is my most wild spot. It's where I just release. I'm like feral and I just it's gritty, it's raw, it's sexy, it's sensual. It's just all of it. It's just all out.
Love it.
That's where I have my big dick energy.
I can feel it. I can tell. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, she's all out there. And we need to rephrase that, right? Like my big puss energy. I'm not sure that that's the right way to say that. But
big
energy? I don't know, but let's think about that. And then wise, for me, I feel wise sharing my wisdom. That makes me feel wise. This is all coming straight from my wisdom.
Absolutely. Well, for anybody listening, go check out Sophie and get more of her wisdom. If you found yourself identifying with what she was saying, what she shared today, go give her some likes and follows, and we will be releasing this soon. I'm so excited. We'll keep you posted, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much.